Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. We're going to start the session right now. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today to talk about youth engagement, and we're really excited to get this started. So just a few housekeeping rules. The session, as you just heard, is being recorded, so I hope everyone's okay with that. Please, if you're unable to unmute yourself, to please put messages into the chat box. When you do speak, please introduce yourself. You can also raise your hand. If I could just ask for everyone to stay muted until they speak. There's going to be quite a bit of interaction, so we're excited to have you participate and make this a really lively conversation. And you will get copies of the results. And we're just going to welcome Gaia, and we're going to get it started. So over to you, Sean. Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne. So today we're talking about youth. We call it Youth Conundrum, and I think it's funny because we have a bit of a tendency, I think, to treat youth as if it's a big mystery. That how can we understand these youth, and it's so complex. But really, I think there is a lot of understanding about some of the issues, partly because we go through that phase of life ourselves, but also because we're so invested in this issue. It's something that people deeply care about, and we know that it's something that we want to do a lot of work on. As a volunteer center, something we care about. But we know that all of you are joining this call because you care about it, and so there are some areas, though, of this conundrum that we could explore further, and that's what we'll be talking about today. We'll talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on youth, and I'm more interested in hearing from each of you around what you're seeing as impacts. And also, we'll take a look at some of the trends in terms of how things are proceeding in terms of youth engagement, the broader factors in society around youth. And we'll look at our youth volunteerism, what we can do around youth volunteerism, as well as youth programs, because these two things are not entirely disconnected. They're very much related. And then we'll have some discussion about how we can sort of approach this right now, and how we can adapt to the trends. So I'm going to jump right into it. So thanks again, everybody, for participating. So speaking a little bit to the health factors in what we're seeing and what we've been reading, it's quite significant, the impact on health around COVID-19. So we know, of course, that there's the mental health aspect, which we've been speaking about in some previous calls, especially around the social isolation factors. That youth are having a difficulty being able to connect, like many of us. Participating in physical isolation is difficult, and it's not something that's always easily understood. What is a big factor generally is that studies consistently show that youth are less risk averse than adults tend to be. With age, you become more averse to risk. So the idea of telling a young person, don't go out there, keep your distance, they may not necessarily, they may understand even the risk factor, but they may not be bothered by that risk factor. So for them, taking on that social isolation, some youth will adhere to it, and others, will have a really hard time adhering to it. And even if you do adhere to it, then how does that impact you? So the bad news as well is another major factor. When I talk about these impacts, they tend to sound very, very heavy in themselves. So it is increasing our levels of anxiety, and definitely that's true for youth organizations have seen that as well. Another item that is perhaps less obviously visible is how it impacts people in their homes. And youth are finding that there are more family conflicts and even cases of domestic abuse, which we've been hearing about. And so that's something that we've been at the community response table. It's been something that's been mentioned, and we've been asking to find out, what is the sort of the volume and measure of this particular issue. And then, another aspect of the mental health is the rise of cyberbullying. Cyberbullying already being an issue, but with increased time spent on the internet, that is just something that's sort of a reality right now that, and a lot of sort of anti-bullying work has been taken on in the last few years, but just by the sheer volume of people joining these online sessions, that's a factor for sure. Then there are traumas. So traumas with the terms of the sudden changes in their living situation, especially for at-risk youth or youth who are living already in a modified situation, or struggling with being homeless or underhoused, or perhaps in foster care. Those people are at greater risk of facing a trauma related to their living situation being suddenly modified by COVID-19. So quite a few aspects there. And then certainly if they're dealing with grief, if they've lost somebody because of COVID-19, or they're being thrust into a caregiving role because of COVID-19, that can also be a significant trauma. And then the trauma from loss of experiences, for example, if their graduation is canceled or something that they were really looking forward to. They had some sports tournament, a upcoming, artistic project that they were trying to do. Things get canceled and things have been put on the back burner with not a lot of clarity on when or how those things can be, will be able to be returned to them. So that is certainly a source of trauma. And then there's the physical health aspect. Aside from just COVID-19, if someone is afflicted by COVID-19, there's the issues of, their sports programs being canceled. A lot of the sports and rec has taken, a turn to being on the bare minimum, if it exists at all. And so that's leading to a lack of exercise, and access to healthy food is also another one. So there's this huge health impact of COVID-19 on all of us, but it's certainly pronounced for youth that we have to consider that. And then there are a number of impacts in terms of their education and employment. So these are the two main areas that I wanted to focus on, is the health and the education and employment. And so, of course, there's already been a lack of jobs, and now with the changes to the work, the sort of nature of work, that meant that many people are no longer working, and where there are or will be jobs, there will be increased competition for those jobs. And that also is true for skill development opportunities, including volunteerism, which I'm sure we'll hear about later from your organizations of what that looks like. School-based learning programs. So aside from their actual classes, there's also the factors of whatever extracurricular programs they may have participated in that were designed to sort of support their skills. Usually schools are currently trying to offer some kind of learning online, and many of the schools have adapted that and mobilized to provide the means to do that for those who may not have had access to a device to access the internet. But that's a serious factor, is that even after you've somehow had offered your in-class learning, you don't have those extracurricular programs haven't really been accounted for at all, because the schools have to just struggle to meet the basics. Income. So youth working part-time could be a large factor as far as contributing to their own sort of disposable income, as well as their net family income. And if they have seen a loss of employment in their family, that may also be a major barrier that's going to be present for the youth that we're seeing. And then the broader school impacts, post-secondary uncertainty for those who are applying or already had been taking classes or seeking other types of learning opportunities outside of beyond high school. Sudden shift to virtual learning. We know we all have learning styles, and being asked to add, sort of participate in virtual learning is a significant factor. So lots going on as far as how the impact of COVID-19 is hitting youth, and it's that's when you look at all of that and consider some of the other things that are at play. We can see that it's a very significant issue and can be daunting to take this on, but that's why we feel such an important conversation to have. And we know that there's so many things that we can do and have been trying to do among our organizations, and we really feel that by working together we can maybe tackle some of this. So I wanted to speak quickly to some of the future factors, and then we'll get into a bit of a discussion. So outside of the current paradigm of what COVID-19 is hitting us with, there have been different things that are really significant to us, and then that have been going on for years. And now, we've been forced to pause and reflect, and so we can potentially use this as an opportunity to pay attention more to these factors and start to deal with them. So RBC did an amazing article called "How Youth Can Adapt and Thrive in the Age of Disruption," and this article, there's a full report that we'll share with you after the call, but I just wanted to pull a few quotes from it that I think are really important. So it says, in the coming decade, half of all jobs will be disrupted by technology and automation. Some will change dramatically, others will disappear completely, replaced by jobs that are yet to be invented. So that's one of the disruptive factors. Certainly the technology side of things. And then it says more than a quarter of Canadian jobs will be heavily disrupted by automation in the next decade, and half will require a new mix of skills, even if the job title stays the same. So, what kinds of opportunities are we training them for? And they also speak to the essential nature of flexibility, because a person needs to have a flexible set of skills. And are we, providing that flexibility, and are we thinking of our skill development in regards to our volunteer positions, but also in terms of our programming, that in a way that is giving youth those flexible skills and the combination of soft skills and practical skills. So these are some of the future factors mentored in this RBC article. The Brookfield Institute also has done an amazing study, which is quite recent. It just happened last December that they released their report. And basically, it boils down to the idea that we talk about skills, but we don't know what we're talking about. Because when we often speak to skills, we are thinking to ourselves, well, there's lots of different types of skills out there, but the specificity of knowing what types of skills are actually needed in the world and are going to be increasingly needed is not there. So this is a table that just came from that report, which I'll just speak. It's just an example of what they've basically analyzed. One of the things that they analyzed is that in job postings, that the top most digital skill that's asked for in a job posting is Excel. So everybody's saying you need Excel to work in this job. And in schools, students get some training in Excel and will get some experience in Excel, but they don't necessarily excel at Excel. But that's not what's the key here of this table. What's most important to pay attention in this table is the rightmost column, where they speak to digital intensity, which is basically the idea that when you're working in a particular field, there are specific skills that are actually needed more, and that are actually the ones that are not as necessarily as proportionally visible in the job postings. So you'll see that some of them are marked high. So the first one that's marked high there is database management software via SQL. So question is, how many organizations are providing opportunities to give students the ability to learn how to manage the database? Maybe some are, but probably very few. And that's something that's going to be an increasingly necessary skill, and not just a skill for somebody who becomes an SQL database manager necessarily as a role title, but as we said in the flexible skills, meaning you need to have this skill set along with a bunch of other skill sets. So and so this report, focused a lot on the digital skills, but I think it speaks to the broader issue that we often say we want to give youth skills when we design programs or when we want to create volunteer opportunities. But which skills are we talking about? Sometimes we're talking about soft skills. Sometimes we have a specific skill in mind, but are those skills the ones that are going to be greatest need in the years to come? And as I said in the previous slide, the main thing is that we're looking at a 5 to 10 year range from when we're going to see these dramatic shifts in employment. And now, because of COVID-19, since this report was released prior to COVID-19 and the employment factors are now amplified significantly, we are going to be facing quite a significant situation. So, these are some of the examples of just how things are changing, and I'm sure you'll be interested to read this. So both of these reports will be added as links to our COVID-19 page following the call. But I just want to set that as a context. So this is what we're dealing with as far as the changes in the landscape, both for the future and the sort of the impacts on youth right now with COVID-19. So in terms of youth volunteerism, that leads us to wanting to know from you. Are you engaging youth volunteers presently? What challenges are you having? If you're not engaging them, what's sort of the prospect of you being able to engage them in the near future? Let's have a little bit of a discussion on that. I'm sure there will be some discussion about, we would like to discuss some of the opportunities around what's available now. There's a lot of emergency funding that's coming through. Maybe there are some ways we can adapt by seeking out some of that funding to support some work to really focus on how we can serve youth in terms of volunteerism and community service. And we'll also in a moment talk about some of the programming aspects of what we can do. But first, let's hear from the group here on what their status is of their youth volunteers. Are you engaging them, and what are you seeing as challenges? What's preventing you from being able to engage youth volunteers now?
This is Gaia from Rotary Club.
Hi, Gaia.
How are you?
Great, thanks.
Basically, right now, as for my youth volunteers, there's nothing going on because they're all in school, basically doing their schoolwork, so I don't want to disturb them. But hopefully, when the programs go virtual in the summer, I'm hoping to get them on board to teach the coding program on a virtual perspective. But I do engage with my my youth volunteers like once a week just to see how they're doing and do like a check-in and just keep them updated on like when are we going to be opening and when our program's going to be coming on and everything like that.
That's fantastic, guys. So what would you say is sort of the volume like? Do you have off the cuff an estimate of the numbers of how many youth you would sort of be able to bring back over and start engaging in terms of the coding workshops and so forth?
Maybe 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would it take to be able to engage more? If other organizations wanted to kind of like, because you're in the STEM area where you're giving really practical skills that are youth are getting practice in those skill sets. So do you think that if there were simply more resources around your organization that you'd be able to scale that operation up?
Yeah, if we could have more virtual programming done during the summer, I can get more youth facilitators come on to work online with our instructors.
Okay,
but that's another, like, we're just trying to figure out the whole online platform as well, right? That's another challenge to navigate what kind of tools and resources to use for different programs. So that's another thing that we're working
So at
on.
present, is everything paused, or you just do you have a timeline of when you think you'll be able to bring those programs back online?
Well, my seniors program, I'm running it virtually. As for the STEM and coding, we will bring it back up in hopefully July.
Okay, great. And others can chime in about their challenges, and especially if any of you are also running STEM-based programming or the programming that or services that can be brought online or that are well suited to being executed online. We'd like to hear about that too.
Chat box here. It's Robert, Volunteer NBC. Therese of the Center for Education and Training states we have the Empower Her, and it's HER program. But she says the regular ways of finding participants are no longer available. Schools are not encouraging volunteerism, so TCT is finding it harder to I guess you could say, secure participants. Caledon Community Services, Andrea says, we have seen a drop off of youth volunteers now that they no longer are required to get community service hours to graduate for this year. And she also, I guess, joins in Gaia in saying the students are busy with schoolwork. I mean, obviously, the announcement about the school year basically ending may impact that. But Andrea adds, we have some who we are continuing to engage for when we reopen. And she's doing that by weekly updates and communications.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Before we go to the other comments, I think let's speak to a couple of these. So regarding Therese's comment around
coming in, so maybe if you want to reiterate how to pin so that they can best see you through the work.
All right. So just a reminder, guys, if you want.
So there's some background noise there. I'm not sure if that's a question for us or a comment, but I can't quite tell. So if you have if you're in the background here, either introduce yourself or mute your mic. So so what Therese was saying, around having difficulty finding participants. So there for the Empower program. So that might be something that through a cross section of work between different organizations, more participants can be found for some of the programming. But the piece around schools not encouraging volunteerism per se, as well as what Andrea's kind of said around not having the requirement to gain community service hours. I think these probably are issues that could be mitigated depending on how the outreach is done. And not to say that there isn't good outreach, but maybe with some effort around with some of the other organizations that do have a surplus of youth that are on the sideline waiting to kind of get engaged, we could provide some of these opportunities to them. But the question is, what does that opportunity look like? So Therese, if I'm not sure if you have access to your mic to chime in here, but if you want to add anything about how your program works, we'd love to hear that. And then as far as Andrea, your comment around the students being really busy right now, I think that's quite true. It's usually a busy time of year anyway. End of May, early June, exam period for high school students. The post-secondary students have just recently finished their school year, so they're kind of coming in a wave of what can we do now. So we're seeing that where there's a lot of post-secondary youth that are interested in getting involved, but might not have real clear opportunities. And so as far as the high school students go, I think we're going to obviously see that school year is going to come to a close in short order. And are we going to be prepared as a sector within the next month or so to deal with that wave of youth looking for things to do? Theoretically, some things will reopen, but maybe not at that scale that they were. And certainly if there's a program that scales down, that means that they have a lot of usual participants. So you have whether it's a arts-based campus that youth would normally go to, and then they're not able to participate. So now there's many more youth sitting on the sideline disappointed that they couldn't do that. So are we as a sector going to be able to offer enough, virtual or other types of programs that can, deal with that wave? It's usually a tough thing to do in a good year. Now, what are we going to do? So any comments on that or others?
Sean?
Yes.
Sean, before we go to other comments, Leslie have been raising her hand up. She would like to speak. Leslie, you can unmute yourself and then please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you good afternoon now, but thank you for inviting me to be a part of the group. I hold a few hats. I am with the Learning Disabilities of Peel Region, and I'm also Vice Chair Special Education for the Catholic Board of Peel. So we just had a big meeting. So this is actually kind of flowing in with next steps for youth. So yes, as far as the announcements that have come through the pipe, there's a lot of fast work whereas youth are engaged, and now that will be the clear focus moving forward, because I think to a certain degree, some people thought that the kids would at some point might go back to school. So there was a dialogue around volunteerism and youth in the high school community. And now I think once the students find themselves, working through their programs and doing the work they have to, they will find the time to be included in volunteering. And I think one of the challenges that was brought up yesterday is that so many people have been focused so much on what they need to do in their life. But again, there's a lot of empty time that is not 100% geared to just academia. So my question or a comment would be from, what I found in the meeting component was if there was a way for more outreach, maybe through social media or Instagram, to let through groups, let their public know that there's various things that come available as they modify their programs as well to engage the youth. I know, for example, Fashion Circuit, we turned around our platform, which is to showcase youth students and specifically in the arts, and now have created a mask making production. And we are now starting to get not only post-secondary students that have completed, but some young entrepreneurs and volunteers that are willing to participate. So I guess my point is, if there's a way that we can somehow corral the different agencies together more so we can, get the awareness and the voice out there to the youth. Yes, you're not in school, and yes, you're doing academia, but there's this opportunity of volunteerism that, we'd love to have your support. And I know some of the people have already mentioned different groups and different things that they're doing. So that's just my comment.
Yeah. Thanks, Leslie. That's really insightful, both on the front of just what is happening inside the schools, but also when you mentioned about like outreach. And so if that's something that we're seeing is a struggle on a couple of fronts. One is that some organizations have programs that aren't reaching the students, and the students on the other hand are struggling to kind of keep track of what is available to them. Then I think we can do a lot of work here, and there's a great opportunity to focus a lot on building up engagement. But I think a lot of the way in which we get the word out has been a little bit old-fashioned. We definitely have had some conversations previously around what we could do to collaborate on communications fronts. So we got to implement some of that. If organizations want to reach out to Volunteer BC to do a video spot or a social media spot, we'd happily do an interview to kind of put a spotlight on your project or presentation or volunteer opportunity for youth. That's something that we would absolutely want to do. Do other people want to comment on what Leslie just said or add?
Derek of the City of Mississauga has indicated that the city is not engaging youth volunteers or any age currently. Their main focus is figuring out how we will be able to run our programs first and the volunteering component will follow thereafter.
Right, that makes sense, and yeah, we will talk a little bit about, the programming side of things, and definitely in that arts and recreation space, there are tons of programs, and within the cities themselves, and then all within the nonprofits, which of those can actually run in a virtual fashion, or will require a lot more sophisticated planning in order to make it work in a sophisticated, make it work, or scale it such that you can run it in a smaller scale. Great comment, Derek. What about does anyone else want to speak to any challenges they've faced in terms of engaging youth right now?
Corinne has raised her hand.
So I was just wondering if there's normally Volunteer BC does an awful lot of outreach into the schools at this time of year to get students ready, even in grades 7 and 8 for the summer. And I was wondering, Leslie, if there's an opportunity to perhaps still do that, but in a virtual format, so that we at least can start to promote all the organizations that have volunteer opportunities and get into the schools in a virtual capacity. I'm just wondering if that's
sure. I can, what I can do, because so much changed so quickly yesterday, I do know that both boards have put out on their websites a feed which helps students navigate. I guess, again, the focus has really been on how do we get online educating going. But within that capacity, yeah, I do believe there is, and they are working on it. So offline, we could connect, or anyone can connect with me later. I'd be happy to connect you or find out the information for you, because I think that's one of the dialogues, and just even being part of the table that sits not necessarily just for the general public, but including special education. What we found with a lot of our agencies, people had programs like the city and us, for example, that now if they are going to be, they're going to be virtual. And that's one of the things. We're a little bit in a time warp because we're playing a catch up to create something that was physical. So, I think there's a lot of support that could come from the younger population in just navigating simple things like the social medias and programming to get it going and to get the outreach. So I do believe there is and will be, and it will be, it's in the works. Obviously, it'll be one of the things that happens within the next week. That moves forward to try to, link everyone together. So definitely be happy to support or provide any of the information that I'm able to along the way.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Leslie.
Rada has her hand raised.
Hi. Hi, this is Rada from Brampton Library. I'm sure we will be facing a lot of challenges moving forward due to this pandemic that has caused disruption in many services. So one of the things that we might not keep in mind, but it's very present, what I'd like to say is that this summer we will have a lot of students that will not go away. So in the summertime, we either have a summer school or we have students that go back to their native countries. So for this summer, I don't anticipate there will be such a large movement in a travel business. So we will have increased number of teens in Brampton area and Mississauga and Caledon that will be looking to do something to fill in their time, because ultimately, I don't regard volunteering as just number for the hours. It's more so of being involved in the community and learning how to be really human and supportive. So this is for this past 8 to 9 weeks, I have been sending every week inspirational letters to my volunteers, and I have 160 of them, where I was highlighting the hardships of other children in the world that are trying to get some better education versus them having to deal with pandemic and staying at home. At least educational system and Brampton Library was doing almost impossible things to deliver a new curriculum online. So they at least had the chance to empower themselves academically and personally, even though they were staying at home. So I just wanted to draw the parallel between them staying at home and still learning and versus other children in the world that have struggles to get a basic education. So that was, I must say, well received, because I shared these different documentaries that were promoted on our website on Canopy. And I had this project, today a reader, tomorrow a leader. So I encourage them to keep reading and sending their book reviews. So for each book review, I awarded them 3 hours.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Radha. So speaking to your first point about just sheer volume, I think that you're absolutely right. We're going to be seeing more youth that are free to who would have time on their hands to get involved, but now the lack of opportunities is definitely going to be a significant thing. And then I didn't so much speak to this in the impact. I want to keep it positive, but we know from lots of existing research that when youth are engaged, that also keeps them out of trouble, and so avoiding risky behaviors and so forth. So I think that's something also that is going to be a community focus. As far as the library's quick movement to generate virtual programming or convert some of its existing programming into an online format, I think that absolutely needs to be showcased. We need better ways of driving youth participation in that. And I think as we get more participants, it'll also generate more volunteer roles. So thank you for that. And as far as the second piece about having that awareness of one's social location, I think it's very important that the reason you touched on it, that youth volunteerism or volunteerism in general is a means of building one's empathy, and if they're not able to volunteer, then we definitely still need to instill this sort of importance of empathy, and being able to hear about how others are adapting to COVID-19 is important. And so we are very interested in being able to share those stories as well, stories that are both local as well as understanding how this is impacting everybody in our community, and even the stories of great volunteers and what they're stepping up to do. Before I move on into the next thing, did anyone else want to add a comment here?
Robert, I just wanted to mention the template on our COVID-19 webpage, the Study Buddy. And that template was prompted, I guess, by obviously school programming going completely virtual. And even though school now has been is being furloughed until further notice, I just want to point out that one of the big contributions that template or that role potentially can do is not only to technically inform students about how to use the tools, the virtual tools that are available to them, but really I think it's more a matter of developing, instilling, and solidifying confidence. E-learning, some people take to it very easily. Other people come to it sort of kicking and screaming. But if we can promote through various roles, and it's not just Study Buddy, if we can promote that kind of volunteering role, I think it's, speaking of youth, I think it would be a great investment.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, and we've spoken on some previous calls about trying to generate more virtual roles, and you've created the templates that organizations can use to help recruit volunteers for those roles, or design roles for existing volunteers. So I think that's really important. And Leslie was speaking about engaging them more in social media and so forth. So even at Volunteer in BC right now, we've been scaling up the number of youth or generally volunteers that we can take to support us in a virtual capacity. And the more we've taken on, it's generated more opportunities for them to engage. So it's also a little bit of the empowerment of volunteers to take on more skilled roles and more complex roles, which can be a little tricky for organizations to adapt to, but maybe necessary. So we'll speak to a little bit to this more as we go on here, but I want to touch on a couple of things quickly. So United Way, Red Cross, and the community foundations announced and released their community investment round of applications. So for a year of funding related to emergency funding, they do kind of specifically mention serving vulnerable populations, including youth, especially at-risk youth, that they would love to see applications of that nature come forward to do something now between now and March of 2021. And so, that's definitely an opportunity for organizations independently or working together or working with Volunteer BC, create a great project that involves community service as well. And some of these projects could be, involve youth as volunteers supporting another vulnerable population like seniors, for example, or it could be, youth serving youth, or it could be that youth are simply the beneficiaries of a project, but very important to look at that because it's a significant stream of funding that's come through. And the government also announced the student service grants, which are funding for students directly to get them involved, up to $5,000. They haven't given the particulars yet. They said that it's on their I Want to Help platform, which they're going to be releasing, and on that platform, they'll be explaining how students can qualify for it. But basically, they've said that in lieu of employment, which they normally have student jobs, and they have now it's student service, meaning even if the student is volunteering, they'll give some kind of an honorarium or payment, or in this case, a grant rather, to that student to basically, give them a compensation. So I think that is going to be something we're going to have to watch out for, and probably a lot of people are going to come forward through that program saying, look, I received funding to volunteer. Now, where can I volunteer? So that's also going to result in an increased thing. So that's something we have to kind of be cognizant of. I want to speak briefly to some of the programming that exists. So, I want to ask, what is the status of your programs that are specifically focused on skill development for youth? What are some strengths and weaknesses of programs like this, and the challenges associated with it? So touching on some of your existing programs, this may not necessarily be programs where youth are volunteers, but they're skill development. There are many leadership programs sort of out there. Hard to gauge, how many are having a lot of success and how many are able to adapt in a virtual setting. Volunteer in BC does offer some of its programming, and we are currently also trying to, see which ones can we, what aspects of our programs are we offering virtually and not. So normally we have our Step Up program where we train youth as volunteer ambassadors so that they can promote volunteerism that's itself and promoting different organizations and their opportunities. So that's focused on high school youth, as well as our Youth Leadership program. Youth Lead is leadership education and development, where we give them more project management and volunteer management related skills and leadership training. So these programs kind of broadly are really focused on building up their skills, and we focus on specific skills. In the Step Up case, we're focused on their communication skills primarily. How do they present, and how do they how do they get a message out effectively? And then in the youth leadership, as I mentioned there, project management, volunteer management training, the project management usually takes the form of students working toward developing a community service initiative. So they gain some training, they come up with a project concept, they pitch their project, and then the selected project goes and is then executed. So that's a training that we've developed, but there are other trainings we know are among our organizations in the community, as well as the schools. There's other types of training out there, and now with the need to either scale them or take them virtual, there could be a great opportunity for organizations to work together and really come up with more robust programming that actually has greater outcomes. So that's something to note. And then I want to touch on that we're also involved with some collaborative work. So in Caledon, there's a collective of organizations that have come together to organize around youth employment, and they have a sort of it's collective impact work. So over a 5-year span, how can they increase youth employment in Caledon? And so that involves multiple initiatives, including from Volunteer BC's standpoint, the piece about how can we increase their their level of youth volunteerism to support increasing their employability. So, and I know Supa on the call, he can also speak to this in a moment, but you know, the idea being that these are trends that you know, I spoke earlier about the trends and how we sort of need to be able to support youth skill development in a meaningful way, and that it's going to become more and more pronounced, not just because of COVID-19, but you know, just because this is there are lots of other disruptions in the tech movement toward more automation. So it means that we have to not just think about what we can do specifically in over the summer, although we have to figure that out. It's also how can we start to change our organizational cultures or the design of youth roles to support it. And even at best, right, we have thousands and thousands of youth in our community who would want to volunteer but wouldn't necessarily be able to find volunteer opportunities. It's not equal the number of opportunities to the number of students or youth out there. So what does that mean then? It means that we need to sort of build their capacity to generate community service initiatives. So that's my piece on that. Let's throw back out to the group here. Are you offering that kind of programming that focuses on skill development, or what kind of programming do you have for youth? And feel free to describe it. I know a couple of people have mentioned a few things. Please let us know what you're doing and what sort of is the limitations around that.
Therese at Center for Education and Training has given details about Empower Her, and that's EMPOW capital HER. She describes it as all virtual. We are teaching everything from graphic design to employment prep, while encouraging youth to take their skills and support nonprofit organizations. It's all designed for skill development.
Okay, great. So definitely we want to be able to sort of leverage that to direct people to those opportunities. I know Karina is saying we can't forget about the human skills development through volunteering. Yep, soft skills, definitely, the flexible skills. Now the thing is, I know, Supa, are you on the call? Do you want to speak briefly about like Youth Voice Collective and you know, how, like, I know you had a comment in here also asking about the data available. So do you want to just give a little overview of how that might tie into some of this?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the invitation, Sean, and pleasure to join the call. My name is Supa Miko from the Town of Caledon's Strategic Initiatives Department. And as Sean mentioned, Volunteer MBC is one of the proud participating members of our collective that is focused on increasing the youth employment rate for youth living in Caledon. And as part of that vision, what we are taking a look at is ways to not only place young people into jobs, but also ways to ensure that they are equipped with the necessary skills and tools to be successful during pre-employment opportunities. And we recognize the value of volunteerism in assisting to provide those useful skills and competencies that youth can develop with a variety of volunteer opportunities. The question that I was posing to the group is around the lack of jobs, as that ties into the current situation and problem, in that one of my colleagues earlier mentioned that it sounds like we're going to have a surplus of volunteers and we'll have supports in place and funding in place to support volunteers, but there might be some challenges around placements and businesses and different organizations to take on these volunteers with tangible opportunities. So I was wondering if through Volunteer MBC or any of the other leaders on the call, if any data is available around the lack of jobs right now, so we can get an understanding of the impact and what's currently out there.
Thanks, Supa. Yeah, now speaking to your question, I don't know if we have anybody from the region on the call who would know. I know that we've definitely heard a few things, related to, for example, normally TCT would be administrating the summer employment programs. One of the major summer youth employment programs that's in Peel, where that would have been a program that would have provided some youth jobs right now, and that was canceled for the summer this week. So I think that there are other possibly others that are having to either cancel or scale down. As far as some key data around that, I think that's something for sure that we'll need to be able to track. Now, it might be the case that some of the organizations that are tapped into youth volunteers may hear from their own volunteers around, hey, you know what, I'm no longer working, or that we have reduced hours at my job, so I don't have as many shifts. And precarious work was already quite common. So I think that would be really useful, is for our organizations to also kind of participate in that what's called community-based data, because really we can't wait for StatsCan to tell us that, okay, this is the status of youth employment. We have to basically supplement that with a lot of community-based data, and who is doing that, who would be collecting that. I think we definitely would need to connect with the region. We can kind of bring this up to the community response table too, as ask them if they have any recent data, or how are they intending to track that in the next while. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Leslie has her hand raised, and Corinne has her hand raised as well.
So it's Leslie. So I had a few comments. Number one, so I know from some of the, historically, the students that have gone to take on jobs in the community that were camp-based. As you know, most camps will not open, some will, but it's interesting because some of the youth that we work with collectively, for example, that would work for U of T summer camp, have already been told, we're not opening. So at this time last week, so you should really look at that financial opportunity that they're giving out to that population. Having said that, there is a culture that seems to be forming where youth are, let's face it, parents want them to gain some kind of skill as whatever they can get them to do and keep them so they're not bored. So these great part-time jobs or full-time summer things were wonderful. Now the culture, the money's coming in, but the parents are saying they want to know that there's some kind of information out there or awareness to bring and encourage the student population to volunteer, even though they are getting some kind of financial benefit from the government, just to keep them not only for their skill development, but also for, keeping them busy as opposed to bored and looking for mischief. And I found it was interesting, like Radha said, there are students now that historically have gone away or overnight summer camp, which will not be the case. So we'll have a lot of youth in the community that we historically haven't really seen because for various reasons they're doing whatever they're doing. That doesn't include being home.
Thanks, Leslie. Let's get Corinne. You had a comment quickly. I just want to make sure that we're getting close to our end of 10 minutes.
Sean, in the interest of time, because there's only 5 minutes left, I'll save my, not to worry, because I know we.
So briefly, if there are some ideas that people want to bring on the call, I think those are important to also get a chance to kind of explore some of that. We've been discussing, how can we generate more relevant volunteer opportunities that bring value to youth participants? How can we support the youth right now? And then I was also wanted to know, from the future trends, what changes do we need to make to catch up with these trends? How can we avoid duplication of effort and create better youth programming that has embedded community service? And what do we need to include in a community-based solution? So really looking for your ideas, your input, and I know we don't have much time, so that's okay. We'll definitely take whatever threads we can pick up. Even if you mention something, we can take them into separate conversations and get into some groups. And one of the things that Volunteer BC wants to do is, even for its own it's so-called own programming. We say it's our own, but it's, you know, we do programming with collaboration with lots of our member organizations. And so even for that kind of youth programming, where can we team up? Who wants to be part of, like, you know, curriculum redesigns, and who wants to be, you know, who is already kind of has something cutting edge that they think needs to be scaled in, that, you know. So we've heard some good things, and I'd love to, you know, hear any other ideas that people have that may have been didn't get a chance to mention earlier.
Just a really quick idea here, Sean, and it might already be in place, but I think it would be beneficial to address one of the problems in terms of impact on education and employment. If there is currently an inventory of skill development opportunities that the leaders on the call have access to, if that could somehow be synthesized or shared in some way, shape, or form, I think it would speak to some of your comments earlier about minimizing and eliminating any duplication, and it could also help in terms of addressing the problem and bringing more valuable information and resources to youth who can benefit from it. So if there is anything out there that's already circulating, or if we could maybe take a look at how we could create something to highlight all of the skill development opportunities that currently exist in the region of Peel, I think that would be a good starting point to continue on the conversation and to address the lack of skill development opportunities that are out there, with us getting a better understanding of what everyone is doing. So just some food for thought. I think
you're absolutely right, Supa. I think there's two things. One, briefly, just one is that generally when there are skill development opportunities, whether that's a program that includes a volunteerism component or some kind of community service component, or even something that's pure program that's just youth as clients, right? You know, indexing that is extremely important. Some of those come our way when they get turned into volunteer opportunities, but sometimes organizations are going, well, we're not recruiting right now because we already have so many youth that are kind of sitting on the sideline that we're trying to engage. We know so many that we can handle at a certain time. So if they're not recruiting, they don't tend to create volunteer opportunities for it that get posted in our system. So we're aware of some, but we're not aware of all, because, you know, it all depends on that organization's need and if that organization's connected with us and so forth. So I think, you know, we can definitely you know, play a role, and if organizations want to let us know, we would love to be able to highlight that, even if your program is closed and you're not recruiting, but so that people know it exists. And I think that's really important. Also, 211. You know, for better or worse, we like to 211 is a really behemoth kind of tool, which is designed for information purposes. But unfortunately, keeping it current with so many changes in the nonprofit sector, that doesn't always happen. So, you know, maybe we need to kind of look at how people get information and really get diligent about it, so people can go to 211 and say, yeah, this is reliable. I can know that this is a good source for appeal, because that's a tool that's meant to do exactly this, so people are aware of what's out there, and be able to search and so forth. So we have to kind of foster that, and maybe that's something we can take post call, you know, from any of you. We'll definitely, you know, coalesce the notes, but some of you might be aware of other programs outside of your own organizations that we should be tapping into, programs like Gaia's that, you know, exist but are full but could be theoretically scaled or replicated somewhere else. These are key things that we need to know them in order to do them. I see a quick comment from Leslie. Welcome support for Fashion Circuit series that are interested in designing, sewing, organizational skills, virtual support, and marketing. Okay, very good. So Leslie, for sure, touch base with our team so that we can, you know, help you turn that into a volunteer position and recruit for it. Any other final comments or thoughts? I see that a couple things that I didn't miss saying here. Derek says we have a leader in training program where youth in class training then volunteer for a week in our camps. However, this is currently not running due to COVID. So maybe, you know, Derek, if we can get in touch with that program lead, you know, we can, you know, support seeing how that can when that gets turned virtual. And I know that you have staff that handles your programming. It's not necessarily volunteer run, but we may be able to direct some more of the participants when it is available, or if other organizations want to kind of build off of its curriculum to offer it somehow. So I think that there's definitely some collaborations that can be fostered here. We're out of time. It's 1:02. Any other comments or thoughts before we close?
Thank you to Volunteer NBC for your leadership on this call. This has been a great discussion, and it's been a pleasure for me to participate. So I just wanted to extend thanks on behalf of the town.
Thanks, everybody. Sorry for the late exit. We appreciate so much. The recording will be available, and we'll be in touch. And this is obviously a big topic, so I suspect we'll be convening at some time in the future around it with an update and more details on ways in which we can work together. Thanks, everybody.